Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. So it is the 27th of December. Had a great Christmas. We over the past, I don't know, several years, maybe it's because my kids have started to grow up and get out of the house mostly. We started to get more into giving gifts that are like, I guess I call them experiences or activities rather than like things. And one of the one of the things that my wife and kids have mentioned over the years is that I'm hard to buy for. And the reason I think I'm hard to buy for is that if I want something, I just get it. Whether it was a certain kind of tie or a pair of shoes or cologne or whatever it was, I would just get it. If I was like, yeah, I want that, I need that, I would just go get it. And so I was hard to buy gifts for. But because we've kind of shifted as a family into unless somebody asks for a specific gift, like this year, and instead of my wife and I buying gifts for all our kids and our sons-in-law, etc., what we did is we exchanged names with all the adults and also with my daughter Brittany. And so this year, one of my sons-in-law had me, and I said, hey, if you want a gift idea, here's something I would really like. And I asked for just some old-fashioned glasses. And they're just the low, like, tumbler glasses or whatever you want to call them, thick on the bottom. And it was just because lately I've been experimenting with old-fashioned recipes. And if you're not familiar with an old-fashioned, it's I make it with bourbon. You could use rye, and I've even been experimenting with some different types of bourbons. I used some Evan Williams on some, and then that bottle was gone, and then we used some Maker's Mark. And the ones I made on Christmas that were really good were we had some Elijah Craig, I think, reserve or single barrel. I have to look on the bottle, but they were really good. Anyway, so that's a gift that I hadn't gone to buy myself. I mean, you don't see a lot of sets of old-fashioned glasses at truck stops, so I didn't buy it for myself. So I got that as a gift. But I got a really cool gift from my wife. One of the comedians, I like to watch comedy clips on YouTube. I feel like at the end of the day, it's fun just to sit around and mindlessly laugh and for, just these comics. So she got me tickets to Jim Gaff again, who's going to be in Baltimore in not too distant future. And so that was really cool. I got her, one of my gifts to her, I actually gave her some wine glasses. One of my gifts to her is we're going away on a weekend or whatever to the Hudson Valley, actually to Hudson, New York, and we have some friends that live there, but Hudson's a cool little town, and I just want to ride bikes up there with my wife. The Hudson Valley is a beautiful area. And so she was excited about that. And my daughter actually made this prank video where I was like, yeah, this place we're staying, it was just like this 1-bedroom apartment they found pictures of. And they're like, yeah, it's right. It's within walking distance of a Taco Bell. And my wife's like, oh, that's nice. But then we told her the truth. And then I had my daughter, and my daughter's really into acting, performing, theater, and like just in the fall she was in 2 different plays, and in community theater, not at school, in community theater. She does stuff at school too, but she's really into it. And so I was like, I have her, Brittany, for Christmas, and I got tickets to a show on Broadway. And by the way, if you're interested in what show it was Kimberly Akimbo, and it was really good. It was, I mean, if you go to see a show on Broadway, and if you haven't ever done like live theater, high quality live theater, and you don't need to go to Broadway. I mean, any big city, Chicago, LA, Washington, DC certainly has lots of stuff that comes through. There are touring companies, all the major cities, but it's, excuse me, it's worth the money. But Brittany had never been to a play on Broadway, and so yesterday on Boxing Day, and if, by the way, if you don't know why it's called Boxing Day, it's kind of a British thing. It's you know, that they say that in Canada a lot, but Boxing Day is, in decades past, people that got Christmas gifts, maybe got new clothes or whatever, they would box up their old stuff and they would leave it outside on the day after Christmas, and people that were less fortunate could come along and pick, you know, like kind of like, I guess, trash pick. But the idea was that you would box up nice things that you weren't going to use anymore to give them to people that were less fortunate. That's where the term Boxing Day comes from. But as you may know or may be able to imagine, New York was a teeming mass of humanity yesterday. We took the New Jersey Transit in from out towards the Delaware Valley, and train was pretty packed. In fact, it was standing room only going into the city. Got into Penn Station, and what I didn't know yesterday that I learned later was that Penn Station, there was some holdup on trains going both north and south, like people going up the Hudson River line up towards Albany, towards Montreal, but also there was some backup on the Northeast Corridor. And so the Amtrak part of Penn Station was just people everywhere, just camped out. But the whole place, it's undergoing renovations too. So the stuff I saw looks a lot nicer than what I remember when I used to go up there for business or whatever, because I would take the train from either DC or Baltimore or whatever. Anyway, so yeah, we went shopping on Fifth Avenue. We, you know, rode in a taxi cab, a legit taxi cab. We didn't take an Uber. Went to this pretty cool Asian fusion place after, because we went to a matinee show. But so it was just a great day. My daughter just loved it, and you know, so and she's really excited. It's no different if your kid plays basketball and you take them to an NBA game, or they play hockey and you take them to an NHL game. That's the big leagues for some kid that is interested in theater or musical theater or whatever. So pretty cool. So I had somebody make a comment, because I guess I mentioned in passing the 50,000 miles of TNT, and by the way, I'm coming out tomorrow, but because I, you know, moved my vacation to the left. So somebody was talking about the TNT, and I've kind of mentioned this in passing before, my thoughts on the mileage and stuff like that. And so let me just say this, and by the way, this person said 50,000 miles was ridiculous, and I interpreted that to mean that they thought it was too much. So let's talk about whether or not, you know, any number is the right number. So if you've been following along, you know that before it was 30,000 miles. That was the standard. And even before that, it was 50,000. Then they lowered it to 30,000. And I don't know, 3 months ago, they raised it to 50,000. So lots of people kind of impute meaning to those numbers, like, oh, well, when they lower it, they're trying harder to get drivers, you know, in trucks, or they got a surplus of trucks, etc. And, you know, perhaps that's what drives it. And, you know, so then conversely, when you raise it to 50,000, it means you want to slow the pipeline down. But here's the interesting thing about that. you know, Prime has a guarantee. So once somebody is out of PSD, they go on the guarantee, and that guarantee is $900 a week. But let's say they can't find a trainer for that person. Well, they still have to pay the $900 a week. It just doesn't come out of the truck because the person's not on a truck. It comes out of Prime's pocket. Now, once somebody gets on a truck, then you know, the truck is paying them, not the truck driver, but the truck if they're on a lease truck. And so, you know, it then the burden is shifted basically. But here's my thinking about 30,000 and 50,000 miles. And I want to talk about it in terms of mileage. The key with TNT is for people to get experience. And the thing is, driving down the freeway when it's a bright sunny day, the road is dry, and there's very little traffic, that's probably one of the easiest things that a truck driver does. It might even be called monotonous, right? About the only thing that can really go wrong when that's happening is, you know, somebody wrecking into you, or you blow a tire, maybe a steer tire, or, you know, you clobber a moose. It's pretty easy, right? It's like, just hold the wheel straight. Set your cruise control, hold the wheel straight. Heck, if you set the cruise control on the newer trucks, you probably don't even need to worry about like slowing yourself down. As if you come up behind somebody, it'll slow you down. So that's the easy part of the job. But it still has a lot of responsibility. It's like piloting a 777 and you got it on autopilot. Well, the plane's going to fly itself, right? Pilots don't have to do much, but they still need to be there and know lots of stuff. So I don't see a huge difference. I mean, we can quantify it, right? It's 20,000 miles. But it's 20,000, and keep in mind that the mileage is not how much the trainee drives, it's how far the truck is going dispatch miles. And just to give you an example, if you recall back in, I think it was in May, my trainee and I went out to Guadalupe, California. And we waited hours and hours and hours. In fact, we waited so long to get loaded that I decided we were just going to leave empty. And the reason was I had somewhere I had to be for a family event. It could not, I hit my hard stop, and I knew I had to drop my trainee off at her home and then continue on to the Midwest. So I just left. I made a command decision and I just left. But guess what? All those miles that we drove out to Guadalupe and then taking her to her home, even though we weren't well, I didn't take the load ultimately, and those miles that we went from Southern Cal to her home, those all went down as dispatch miles. So she got credit for those miles on her 30,000. She had to do 30,000. But here's the thing. I drive more than my trainees. And the reason is I'm not really trying to outwork them. I know Lyle on No Hippie Trucking and Transportation, he talks about outworking his trainees. I don't really do it for that reason. I do it because I'm selfish. I like to drive. I much prefer to drive. And part of it may be that I'm a control freak, but a lot of it is I don't like riding. I don't like sitting in the seat. But let's say we're going somewhere and I'm like, I don't need to sleep. I'm not tired. I'll just sit in the seat and, talk, or, maybe I'll be surfing the web or whatever while the other person's driving, while my trainee's driving. But a lot of times if we both have had a 10-hour break, even if I was the last one to drive, I get behind the wheel and drive. So all the miles I drive count for them, just like the miles they drive. It's based on dispatch miles of the truck. But here's the thing. and here's why the 30,000 and the 50,000 don't matter a lot to me. Because first of all, if you're really running, we might be only talking another 3 weeks, maybe. Could be even less, depending on how hard you're running. And so for that extra 20,000 miles. But the thing that I prefer to consider is the experience that the trainee's getting. So when I went through training, I had to be on my trainer's truck for 28 days, and I'll get to that number in a second. But the reason I like the day count as opposed to the mile count is because, like I said, I might drive a shift where I drive 600 miles, and that person was sleeping, right? They weren't getting trained while I was driving 600 miles. And sometimes I'm sleeping when they're driving, although anybody that has ridden with me knows I spend a lot of time awake, especially in the early stages of training. Like, I don't just tell people, oh, drive to St. Louis, I'm going to wake up in 10 hours. I don't do that. I spend a lot of time in the seat riding beside them. But the other thing that the miles overlooks is the experience. The important part of being a truck driver is a lot of stuff that's done when the wheels aren't turning. For instance, the first of the year is coming up in a few days, right? Everybody's going to need to get new cab cards, right? You got a reminder if you work at Prime, every company sends them out. You got to get new cab cards for after the first of the year. You also are going to need to get a new IFTA sticker. And I think that's usually got to be on the truck by the end of March. Well, all those things, excuse me. Sorry, I had to sneeze there for a second. But all those things I was talking about, just like registrations, permits, liquor permits, IFTA stickers, all that stuff, maybe updated insurance cards. That's stuff that's like, if you don't have it, right, and you get inspected, you're going to get put out of service, or you're going to have to jump through hoops to get, right? That's a big part of being a trucker. And a lot of trainees won't ever get experience being exposed to that. Now, they can ask somebody when the time comes up, but they won't get that experience. Some trainees, at whatever the mileage is, because you never know when these are going to come up, they might not ever have a claim. They might never break down beside the road and need a new tire. They might never have to go in a shop at a truck stop. They might never have to shepherd their truck through the shops at the company. There are myriad things that come with this job that mileage is not necessarily going to get them. Now, theoretically, the longer you do this, the more likely it is that all those events or some of those events will come up. But what I would rather do is say, look, let's put everybody on a truck and say for 60 days, let's say. So 2 months of training, regardless of how far the truck rolls. And here's why that's a big deal. Because some drivers don't like to run coast to coast. But when you have a team and you don't want to run coast to coast, you don't maximize miles. I've heard of trainees who are on people's trucks. The instructors, the guy that, it's his truck or her truck, they don't want to run into Cali. Okay, that's fine. But guess what didn't happen? First of all, you didn't maximize your mileage, right? Because if you're only running, the front range and, along I-25 to the East Coast, you cut way down on the potential mileage you could run in a given trip. But also, you don't teach your trainee to go in and out of California, right? California, as we all know, has special rules. And just because you don't like those rules doesn't mean you shouldn't teach your trainee the rules. Here's an example. I don't like chaining up, right? In fact, I've always avoided it. I know how to do it, and I'm willing to teach somebody how to do it and tell them the rules, like what are the rules in Colorado, you know, all these different states. But if you're like, hey, and after November 1st, I only run Florida to South Carolina. Well, you're not teaching them anything, right? Unless you assume that's all they want to do, right? But if they live in, you know, Idaho, they need to know how to drive through snow. Avoiding snow doesn't mean that you don't have to drive through snow, right? We always should be looking at the weather. But again, it's all those things. It's all that knowledge. And so, you know, there's a lot of truckers that have been sitting because of weather. You know, there's been some crazy winter weather already this year, and we're not even in January yet. And so a lot of truckers have been sitting. But here's the thing, right? I think sitting is valuable sometimes. I think getting into terminals and just, you know, doing the admin stuff that we do, the day-to-day, you know, jumping through hoops, whatever it is, you know, knowing how to get a meal, knowing how to do X and Y and Z. Those are all important skills. And you know, it's not going to be something that people necessarily see because they're running 50,000 versus 30,000. So, to the person who, you know, said 50,000 is too much, I think the way to look at it is, instead of whether something's too much or too little or just right, let's just say, what does the training experience look like? Because it wouldn't surprise me that some drivers, they never do a claim while they're driving, and so they never explain that to their, you know, to their trainee because it didn't come up. And so even though I try to be thorough, I know for a fact, because I get the texts, you know, we have group texts going. I have trainees that say, oh, how do you do this? How do you do that? Because we maybe didn't experience it. So I think the 50,000 miles, that's just kind of it's kind of arbitrary in a way. I would be interested in seeing data on people's performance in their first year after upgrading, when they did 30,000 versus 50,000. But I still would advocate for a daily requirement instead of a mileage requirement, because there are some people that are going to drive 10,000 miles and it's going to be easy as pie. There are other people that are going to drive 4,500 and every single minute of it is going to be tough sledding. You know, if you're driving through West Virginia and Pennsylvania and New York in the wintertime, it can be tough sledding everywhere you go, every minute of it. But if you're driving back and forth across, you know, Texas in the fall, you could rack up a lot of miles and not really experience a ton of adversity when it comes to like weather or, you know, stuff like that. So it's more about the quality than the quantity. And I think sometimes that maybe the daily requirement is a bigger deal than the mileage requirement. So I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts. I mean, I like a checklist. I like going through everything and, you know, getting people as prepared as possible. And, you know, maybe the mileage that they drive is not the most important thing. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Like I said, I'll be back on the road tomorrow. We'll start getting ready for the new year, and hopefully, you know, things loosen up a little bit. Although, again, I haven't really had many complaints. In fact, Prime must be getting a few more loads than they need, because I was just on a load board and I noticed Prime had stuff posted on the load board. Maybe those loads didn't pay much, but yeah, they were posting some loads on on a load board. So Anyway, talk to you soon. Bye.